We're all on a journey through life. You're on a journey through life, and at some point on that journey, you're going to ask a bunch of questions about spirituality. And it's such a big topic, you can kind of wonder, well, where do I even begin the part of the journey when it comes to spirituality? And here's 4 reasons why I think any spiritual journey should begin with Christianity. The first is that Christianity is testable. Second is that in Christianity, salvation is a free gift from God. The third is that Christianity gives you an amazing worldview fit. And fourth is that Christianity has Jesus at the center of it. And if that raises a whole bunch more questions for you than it answers, then head on over to our YouTube channel for the full video. And if you're already on our YouTube channel, run the intro. Now in this video, my goal is not to try and prove Christianity. My goal is simply to say is if you are on a spiritual journey and you're asking spiritual questions, I think the best place to start is with Christianity. And the first reason I said is because Christianity is testable. Now you might not be aware of this because maybe your exposure or the version of Christianity you grew up with wasn't really testable. But Paul, who is perhaps the most influential person in Christianity apart from Jesus, wrote a letter to a Greek city in Corinth, and he said that if Jesus hasn't been raised from the dead, then your preaching is useless and your faith is worthless. In fact, a little bit later, he said that if Jesus hasn't been raised from the dead, then you're more to be pitied than anyone else, which is kind of interesting because what Paul is doing is tying truth to a historical event. And at least in my reading, no other world religion does this. Buddhism and Hinduism rely a real lot on inner personal experience. Any other religion that so closely ties history to truth. Hinduism and Buddhism are really about inner personal experience. And so is a lot of New Age spirituality. It's all about, hey, what do you feel inside? Whereas Christianity says, hey, take me for a test drive, verify me, see if this is objectively true. The second reason is that in Christianity, salvation is a free gift from God. And I know what you're thinking, you're probably like, Chris, nice one, but I don't need saving. But the truth is, like, every spiritual journey we're on is an attempt to connect with God or a deity or the universe or spirituality in some way, shape or form. And if all you're left with is your personal experience, then how can you really know where you sit with that deity or with the universe? But when it comes to Christianity, you already know where you sit with God. Because in Christianity, salvation is freely offered because God already moved in your direction. And there are very few world religions or spiritual movements where this is the case. In Advaita Buddhism or Bhakti Hinduism, there are a few elements where salvation or enlightenment is free, but it's not a no strings attached free. There's still some things that are required of the devotee. But when it comes to Christianity, salvation is freely offered as a gift to the spiritual novice, to the person who's highly educated, to the person who feels like their guilt or shame determine their decisions, to the person who just kind of feels like, hey, you know what, my life is going really, really well. Salvation is freely offered to anyone from anywhere to be a part of it. The third reason is that with Christianity, you get an amazing worldview fit. And I understand that is a massive, massive claim to make. And I can't hope to cover everything in this video. So let me just give you one thing, the really prevalent idea of pain and suffering. In Eastern religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, the idea that is in order to confront pain and suffering, what we need to do is actually realize that pain and suffering are nothing but constructs of our mind. The best way to sidestep them is to remove ourselves from our ego, and then we'll detach ourselves from the pain and suffering in the world. Effectively, Hinduism and Buddhism's response is just simply change the way you think about pain and suffering. Now I get this sounds really, really nice, this sounds really, really noble, but it's really only something someone who lives in a privileged world would consider. For example, think about the war in Ukraine and Russia. There is no doubt that is happening. There is no doubt that villages are being destroyed and lives are being lost and families are being torn apart. So how do you handle that on that worldview? Do you just say, well, if you just changed the way you thought about it, you wouldn't experience pain and suffering? See, when it comes to Christianity, the worldview says that the worst possible thing happened to the best possible person. Now, I'm not trying to explain why evil exists. All I'm saying is if you want to take a serious spiritual quest, you shouldn't start with a worldview that denies the existence of pain and suffering, but you should start with one that acknowledges and admits that it exists. Fourth and final reason is that Christianity has Jesus at its center. Jesus is the closest thing we have to a universal religious figure, with every religion and every worldview seemingly wanting to make a claim to Jesus. In Hinduism, there are plenty of teachers and scholars who say that Jesus is one of the 10 avatars of Vishnu, along with Rama and Krishna. In Buddhism, Jesus is often viewed as a great bodhisattva because he stepped back from the brink of nirvana in order to help others along the path to enlightenment. Islam embraces Jesus as a prophet, and he's the second most important figure in their religion behind the Prophet Muhammad. And New Age spirituality just borrows whatever teachings of Jesus are most applicable for them in that situation. Now, my intention isn't to make any sorts of claims about these spiritual worldviews. All I'm simply trying to say is that if every other worldview wants to claim Jesus as their own, then your quest should start with the worldview that has Jesus at the center. So what did you think of the list? Was it helpful? Was there something you'd add? Was there something you'd remove? Did the list raise maybe more questions for you? Let me know in the comments and we'll address them in a future video.